Hello, my name is Olive Walsh and I'm the Programme Manager for the Government of Ireland Postgraduate Scholarship Scheme at the Irish Research Council. In this presentation I'm going to talk about making an application to the 2015 Government of Ireland Postgraduate Scholarship Scheme. Firstly, I'll give you some information on the Council itself and the scheme. Then I'll look at the application and assessment process. I'll look at what you need to do before you apply, what to watch out for when you are applying, both in terms of the technical aspects of the online system and the content of your application. Finally, I'll give some common feedback from our assessors as to what makes an application stand out, for both the right and the wrong reasons. The Irish Research Council was launched in March 2012, and it represented a merger between the former IRCAS and IRCSET councils. Our mission is to enable and sustain a vibrant and creative research community within Ireland. The Council provides support for all types of research across all disciplines. We run competitive funding schemes for researchers who are engaged in Masters, PhD and postdoctoral programmes. And we also support research projects, knowledge exchange and travel grants. So the Council offers support across a range of postgraduate programmes. Today we're going to focus on the Government of Ireland Postgraduate Scholarship Scheme, which includes strategic funding partner themes. But we also have the Employment-Based Programme and the Enterprise Partnership Scheme. The Employment-Based Programme is currently open as well as the Government of Ireland Scheme, and you will be asked when you apply online to choose between the two. This presentation deals with the Government of Ireland, but if you'd like more information on the Employment-Based Programme, just have a look at our website. These are the postdoctoral schemes that we offer, and these are the project and knowledge exchange schemes. I'm not going to talk about these today, but they give you an idea of the range of support that the Council provides. So looking closer now at the Government of Ireland Postgraduate Scholarship Scheme. The aim of the scheme is to support suitably qualified research masters and doctoral candidates who are pursuing or intending to pursue full-time research in any discipline. Scholars who apply to the scheme will hold a Government of Ireland Postgraduate Scholarship. We also offer a number of scholarships in partnership with other national organisations, and these are referred to as Strategic Funding Partner Scholarships. I'll talk about these in more detail in a moment. The scheme funds scholars who are full-time registered in an eligible Irish higher education institution. The list of eligible HEIs is available on our website. The focus of the scheme is on funding excellence, and the scheme is highly competitive. There's no bias towards one type of degree over another. The Council funds both Masters and PhDs in this scheme. Please note though that we only fund research Masters, we do not fund taught Masters. There's no subject quotas and there are no favoured disciplines. However, note that for the strategic funding partners we do target the specific areas that they're interested in. The assessment of the scheme is by peer review and international assessment board, and this ensures a high level of expertise, and they're also fully independent. We ensure a gender balance across our panels and we regularly rotate the experts that sit on them. I want to talk a little bit more about the Strategic Funding Partner Scholarships for a moment. The Council work with a number of national funding agencies and government departments across many of our schemes to deliver on shared national priorities. In addition to our Government of Ireland scholarships, we also offer a number of scholarships in partnership with the funding agencies and departments that you see listed here. The application and assessment process for these is exactly the same as that for the Government of Ireland scholarship. As an applicant, you need to choose which scholarship you wish to apply for, either a Government of Ireland scholarship or one of these partner scholarships. You'll be asked to choose this on your online system. The terms and conditions for the scheme include an appendix for each of these scholarships, and this will give you full details on the scope and requirements for applying for one. Each funding partner has different requirements, and so if you're interested in applying for one of these, it's vital that you read the relevant appendix. You can then use this appendix as a guide throughout writing your proposal. You'll also have to answer a question on the system as to how your application meets the requirements of the scholarship. So please think very carefully and make sure that your proposal is appropriate to the scholarship that you've chosen. A final thing to note about these scholarships is that if you do choose to apply for one of our partner scholarships, your application, if not successful, may then also be considered for the Government of Ireland scheme. I'm now going to talk a little bit about how to apply for the scheme. All applications must be made online using the IRC online system. You can access this by going to our website at www.research.ie and selecting Online Application as demonstrated in the screenshot here. Clicking on this link will bring you to your login page, where you'll need to register as an applicant to the scheme. If you've applied before to us, then this won't be necessary, as you can use the profile from your previous application. But if you are a new applicant, you will have to register. We encourage you to register on the system as soon as possible. Once you've registered with the system, you'll receive an email with your login and your password details, and from there you can create and submit your application. There is a guide for applicants, a document which is available on our website, and it has full details as to how to use the system. It's essentially a walkthrough of each step that you'll need to create, edit and submit your application, so we strongly encourage all applicants to read the guide and to use it to assist you in making your application. This is an excerpt from a flowchart on our website which details the application and assessment process. This excerpt in particular looks at the application process. OLS here refers to the online system, and the text in blue is the status of your application at a given point. An application is submitted by an individual applicant by the applicant deadline. In 2015, this deadline is the 11th of February. Each application also has a supervisor and 2 referees, and they must submit their forms by the participant deadline, in this case the 18th of February. And finally, each application must be endorsed by the research office of your institution, and they must do this by the research office deadline of the 25th of February. All of these steps must happen by the stated deadlines, or your application will be deemed ineligible. Just a note on who can see your application. Your research office and supervisor will have sight of your application, but your referees never will. Also, once you add your supervisor and referee to your application, they'll receive an automatic email to let them know. Your referee, once they receive this email, can create and submit their form. Your supervisor, however, and your research office must wait until you've submitted the form to do their parts. The guide for applicants on our website will give you full details of this process, and as I said, the flowchart on the website will also detail this. So what happens once you've submitted your application? This slide shows another excerpt from the process flowchart, detailing the assessment process. Once an application is submitted, it goes through an eligibility check. At this point, if it's deemed ineligible, the status is changed to reflect this and the applicant is notified by email. Applications which are eligible are put forward for assessment. Firstly, by an outer international assessment board. This assessment is done by remote peer review. Each application is reviewed by 2 international independent reviewers who evaluate the application according to the criteria. Each application is scored, and the top-ranked applications are then put forward for a second round of assessment. Applications which do not progress to the second stage are updated on the system to reflect this, and again applicants are notified by email. The second stage then of assessment is by the inner International Assessment Board, and once again all applications are assessed by 2 independent reviewers. The board then meet to discuss the applications. They determine an overall judgment of each one and agree on which applications should be recommended for funding. The final stage then in the process is the communication of the outcome to applicants. Applicants are notified by email that their application status will be changed online to reflect the outcome of the process, and so then each applicant can go online and check the status of their application. Applications recommended for funding have a status of conditional award, and the conditional here refers to the fact that the applicant has to supply certain documentation to fulfil the criteria of the scheme. If appropriate, the board may wish to recommend some applications to be included on a reserve list, and this is where an award may be declined by a successful applicant and can then be offered on. And applicants who are not recommended for funding will have a status of unsuccessful application. So that's a quick look at the application and assessment process. If you wish to prepare an application for the scheme, what's the first thing that you should do? I've already mentioned several documents which are available on our website, but in particular the terms and conditions and the guide for applicants. The first thing that any prospective applicant should do is read and familiarise themselves with these documents. Just to clarify the purpose of each of these, the guide for applicants is essentially a walk through the application process to the scheme. Here you'll find details on eligibility, the evaluation criteria, and a step-by-step guide to using the online system. The terms and conditions then provide details on what a successful applicant must agree to in order to accept the award. It tells you about the type of funding that we provide, and through the Strategic Funding Partner Scholarships, the appendices will detail the specific scope and requirements of each scholarship. Both the guide and the terms and conditions are essential documents for an understanding of how to apply for and to hold a Government of Ireland scholarship. So as mentioned, the guide for applicants includes an eligibility flowchart. Each applicant should read through this to ensure that they are in fact eligible to apply for the scheme in the first instance. You must also decide whether you wish to apply for a Government of Ireland scholarship. Remember, this is the scholarship which funds across all disciplines, or a Strategic Funding Partner Scholarship. These are the scholarships that are specifically targeted to relevant areas of interest to our funding partners. As detailed already, there are a number of Strategic Funding Partner Scholarships available through the scheme, and one of the first questions that you will be asked on the online system is to indicate which scholarship you wish to apply for. Next, talk to the relevant parties for your application. You will have to have one supervisor and 2 referees attached to your application. Your supervisor cannot act as one of the referees. For referees in particular, it's worth being very clear regarding the requirements of submitting a reference online and the deadline date. I'll talk a little bit more about this later in the presentation. Next, talk to your research office. They have to endorse your application, and so you need to make them aware of your intention to apply to the scheme. Moving on to the application proper and the proposal content, always bear the evaluation criteria of the scheme at the forefront of your mind. You can find the criteria in the Guide for Applicants, Appendix 3, and there's a lot more information on these criteria in the appendix. But to summarise, the criteria are broken down as follows. 50% of the overall mark is given for the quality of the research project, and within this 50%, 10% is allocated towards your training and career development plan, so do not ignore this aspect. Next, 30% of the marks are allocated to the capability of the applicant to carry out the proposed project. The remaining 20% is allocated to the environment. This includes the host institution, your supervisor, and the match between you and them. So we'd urge you to read the full criteria very carefully and to use them to plan and direct your application, as these are the criteria that the assessors are going to use to judge your application. With regard to your application content, bear in mind that the budget that we have for this scheme is limited and the competition is intense. In 2014, we had over 1,000 applications to the scheme, so you need to do your utmost to make sure that your application really stands out to the assessors. Work on clearly identifying not only your central research questions, but the methodologies that you'll use to answer them. Demonstrate that you clearly understand the existing research context, the state of the art, as it were. You need to think about the expected outputs and impacts and how you're going to disseminate your research. Keep your answers simple and focused, and don't forget to address the question that was actually asked. Remember to answer each question on the form, but bear in mind that the word counts denote a maximum count rather than a target. There's no need to waffle just to meet the word count. Use jargon-free language and aim to write your proposal so that someone who is not an expert in the field would be convinced of its merit. Remember to spell check and proofread your application. It's not just about making a first good impression, but sustaining that throughout the application. As I said, keep the evaluation criteria in your mind at all times. And for anyone applying for a Strategic Partner Scholarship, remember to refer to the relevant appendix and to address all the requirements within that. And finally, don't just apply for the sake of it. You only get 2 chances to apply for the scheme, so make sure that they count. Applications to the scheme are assessed by our international assessment boards, and each year at the end of the process we invite them to give us some general feedback on what makes an application stand out. After our 2014 scheme, these were the comments that they gave back to us. While originality and innovation were obviously praised, the research proposal has to be coherent, with a clear rationale for the research questions that are posed. The methodologies included in the proposal should also be appropriate to the research proposed. The research plan needs to be feasible and realistic, with well-planned timescales and milestones. Applications that had a good career development plan stood out. This is where they demonstrated the capability of the applicant to carry out the proposed research, and also how the proposal would benefit and impact on the applicant's career. Strong and supportive references where the referee essentially backed up the capability of the applicant and were very specific to the applicant's abilities also stood out. With regard to the environment, applications that showed a clear match between the proposed research, the abilities of the applicant, their supervisor and the HEI stood out. Can the supervisor provide the adequate level of support to the applicant? Does the HEI have the required facilities to carry out the proposed research? And is it clear that this is the best environment in which to carry out the research proposed? Applicants should also show that they've looked at, they've thought about and addressed the ethical content of their application, as well as the sex or gender dimension. With regard to the latter, it's easy to assume that your research does not have a biological sex or gender dimension, but this isn't always the case. And this is a relatively new aspect of our application forms, so we'd ask applicants to look at Appendix 2 in our guidelines for more detail on this. Applicants can also apply for essential direct research costs through this scheme, and assessors felt that where applicants demonstrated an understanding of what's reasonable and feasible for their proposed research stood out. So the flip side of this is how applications stood out to our assessors for the wrong reasons. Some of the common errors that were seen across the 2014 scheme are given here. Applicants sometimes failed to make clear the rationale for their choice of research questions. Why was the applicant focusing on some research questions to the detriment of others? Were there other questions that may be relevant that the applicant hasn't addressed? If not, why not? Don't assume that the assessor can work out or will just know why it is you're doing what you propose. Some applications were too ambitious given the proposal plan or the methodologies that they presented. Ambition in a proposal is not necessarily a problem, but the proposal has to be feasible and realistic. Can the applicant really achieve everything that they've set out to do, given the timescale or given the type of degree that they've chosen? Don't be naive about the proposal plan or the timeframes that you're presenting. Some applications didn't clearly describe their methodologies, or provided methodologies that were not appropriate to the proposal. Leaving out information on your methodologies can cast doubts over whether or not the proposed research outcome can be achieved. Make sure that if you need a certain skill to carry out your research that you address this. You may already have the skill or you may need training, but either way you need to state this up front. Assessors won't know your skill base unless you tell them. Some applications didn't demonstrate why their proposed supervisor or HEI were the right fit for them and their project. Many applications often ignore this element. Applicants forgot that 20% of the marks goes to this category of environment. It needs to be appropriate to you and to your proposal. Some references that were supplied were very generic. Applicants need to ensure that their referees know them well enough to give a very specific reference to them that underlines their strengths and their capabilities. In the past, some referees have even described the applicant to their detriment. For example, this applicant is a poor applicant, so make sure you choose very, very carefully the people you wish to supply a reference. For the strategic funding partner applications, sometimes applicants almost glossed over the requirements as set out in the terms and conditions. Make sure that if you apply for a strategic funding partner scholarship, that you really tailor your application specifically to the requirements of that scholarship. And finally, remember that multiple errors across your application may not just come across as spelling errors, but they may raise questions about your attention to detail and ultimately your ability to carry out the proposal. So now that you've worked on your proposal, don't forget to successfully submit it. Remember that an application will not be assessed if it isn't submitted by the deadline. You have to register online with the system, and we advise that even if you're not ready to complete and submit your application, that you at least register in the system well in advance of the deadline. We also advise that you give yourself plenty of time to fill in and complete the application form online and to submit it in advance of the deadline. Make sure that you're 100% happy with your application, including all of the contact details before you submit, because once you press submit, no alterations are permitted. The system contacts you and your participants through the email addresses on the system. When you add a supervisor and referees to the system, they receive an email with login and password details. So we advise all applicants to check with them that they've received this email. If an incorrect email has been supplied, they won't get this contact email and they won't be able to submit their forms. If you've entered an incorrect email address, you can change this any number of times prior to pressing submit. and the guide for applicants has details how to do this. It's your responsibility to ensure that all of the forms are submitted through the system by the deadline. So make sure that you, your supervisor and both of your referees are aware of the deadlines and the requirements to submit online. We can't accept any email or hard copy versions of your application. As I said, no alterations are allowed once the application is submitted. What not to do during the application process. Don't use an unsuitable or out-of-date browser. The guide for applicants has a list of all suitable browsers for the system. Don't press the back button at any stage. If you think of the Ryanair analogy, would you press the back button when you're trying to pay for a flight? No. Then don't press the back button when you're doing your application. Don't log in on 2 different browsers or 2 different windows. And don't leave it until the last minute to register or submit. So to wrap up, if you have any queries on the process, in the first instance you should read the guide and the terms and conditions for the scheme. The scheme operates a frequently asked questions system, so also check the FAQ document on our website, because somebody else may have submitted this query already. If you can't find the answer to your query in any of these documents, go to your research office. They may be able to provide an answer. If they can't, they'll send the request to us and we'll answer it through the FAQ system. We update the FAQs regularly on our website www.research.ie. The FAQ system is in place to make sure that all applicants have access to the same information at the same time. And because of this, the Council are not in a position to answer any queries about the process either by phone or email. If you do phone or email us, we'll direct you to your research office. However, if you have a technical matter that you need to address, you can send these to us by email at the address provided here. For technical queries, we ask that you provide us with your project ID, your browser details and a screenshot where possible. Again, please do not phone the Council with any technical issues. If you do, you will be asked to send an email as described here. So that concludes the presentation. I'd just like to reiterate that the guide for applicants and the terms and conditions of the scheme are available on our website, and these provide essential information for applicants. So please make sure that you read these, and the very best of luck with your application.